Hello, Slicey Dicers. This is Brian with another Battle to the Death for you. As always, these are brought to you by Southern Edge Knife Works. Go to southernedgeknifeworks.com, use the code SDSEK at checkout and get 15% off. Helps them out, helps me out. They're a big help in getting these videos out for these, especially for these battles to the death. So let's get going with this one. This one is a bit unique. Not only is it a battle to the death, it also fits in two subcategories of that. We have a bit of sibling rivalry because these are both Spartans. And also, we have a cheap versus not so much, which is a series that I've done off and on. This is not super cheap versus not so much. You're looking at $115 for the Spartan Talos versus $395 for the Harsey 3.25. So reasonable versus not so much. I guess we can't call it cheap, but reasonable versus not so much. So both obviously designed by the same guy. You can tell by looking at them. Both Bill Harsey designs. Both very similar overall shape. Yeah, as I said, huge price difference. You're looking at CTS XHP steel built in Taiwan versus USA-made S35VN and full titanium frame lock, whereas this is a G10 liner lock. But yeah, this is a very common question I've gotten from you guys. You guys know that I had them both, and you guys are asking which one is it worth it spending more for the 3.25? Spoiler alert, I like both of these knives a whole lot. These are both great choices, but we're just going to do it like we usually do. Score it out and pick which one I would choose. So as always, we have 7 categories: design and aesthetics, quality, blade, ergonomics, carry, deployment, and value. You get 1 point for each category that you win. We add it up at the end, and that's the winner. Now, slight caveat, in the cheap versus not so much, the value I give 2 points for. I give double points in value when I'm comparing a much less expensive knife to a much more expensive knife. Just kind of makes sense to do it that way. So here we go. First of all, let's talk about each knife individually, give you a few stats. We will start out with the Talos because that is the newest one. Not by much. These both came out end of last year. The Talos, as I said, made in Taiwan, 115 bucks, XHP steel, which love seeing that. I really like XHP, and you don't see it much anymore. It used to be really common on cold steels. They just couldn't get enough of it anymore. They have switched to a S35VN, mostly across the board, or other steels for the lower ones, AUS 10A and blah, blah. But you just don't see XHP that much anymore. You see it in some Spydercos, but it's really getting more and more uncommon. I guess it's mostly being sucked up for machine use because it is technically a tool steel. But I really do like XHP a whole lot. It's a great steel. It's pretty easy to sharpen. Great edge retention. Glad to see it back on a full-on production knife. Very, very happy about that. G10 liner lock. It does come in 2 colors. This is the black. It also comes in a green. I obviously prefer the black a lot. I'm just not a big green fan, but if you want a green, you know, that's the one you want. It is a deep carry pocket clip, which is not terribly common for Spartans. It is right hand only on this particular one, but not a bad looking knife. Definitely very Harsey-esque looking. You can see his signature on here, William Harsey, so William W. Harsey. So it's kind of cool to see that on there. You'll see it on the other one as well, but it's kind of cool to see it on a quote-unquote quasi-budget knife. So pretty well done. I will say all the hardware and stuff is really nice quality. We're going to talk more about when we get to the quality things about this particular knife, about these particular, what the Spartan calls these, the field grade knives. We'll talk more about that when we get to the quality section. But let's do some specs first of all. You have a blade length of 3.12 inches, overall length of 7 inches, a blade thickness of 0.13 inches, handle thickness of 0.42 inches, and a weight, according to my scales, of 2.32 ounces. Now, bring out the Harsey 3.25. As the catchy name would imply, this is a 3.25-inch blade version of the full-size Spartan Harsey, which is one of my favorite knives that I own. I was very excited when they came out with this because sometimes, 4-inch blade is a lot. So a 3.25 is a nice change. It is dramatically smaller than the large one if you see them side by side. And if you go watch my review of this, which I will link to at the end here in the suggested videos, you will see it is dramatically different in size. But they didn't just shrink it in one dimension. And I think a lot of knife companies do that. When they make a smaller version, they just go, and they forget about everything else. Definitely not with this. And they did more than even just scale it down. The handle design, once you see them side by side, is different to fit the smaller size ergonomically. The blade stock's a bit thinner. The handle thickness is a bit thinner. They definitely went all out on it. They did not just shrink it in one dimension and call it done. This is right-hand, left-hand carry, full titanium frame lock. Both of these are running on phosphor bronze washers, by the way. We'll talk more about them when we get to the action. The Talos, a little bit different than just your standard phosphor bronze washers, but we'll talk more about that as it goes on. But still feels just as every bit heavy-duty as the full-size one. It's just smaller. How much smaller, you may ask? Well, let's do some stats, and we'll find out. You have a blade length, as you would think, 3.25 inches, overall length of 7.125 inches, blade thickness 0.125 inches, so ever so slightly thinner than the Talos, handle thickness 0.42 inches, and a weight, according to my scales, 2.94 ounces. You'd expect it to weigh a little bit more than the liner lock, and it does. So now let's start with our category. So design and aesthetics. This is the most subjective category. I always do like to point that out, that it is the most subjective category. But to me, yeah, the Harsey all day long. It's just, I'm going to call it the Harsey, even though I know they're both technically Harseys. Just make it easier than saying 3.25. The Harsey all day long. I like the look of the full titanium. Just some of the little details and stuff I like better. Nothing really wrong with this one, but it's just a black or green, G10 liner lock. It doesn't have any really unique look to it, where I think this still has a bit more of a uniqueness to it. I don't know. I like the little Spartan logo on the filler tab. Just a lot of little tiny things that just are a little bit better, as far as aesthetics go. The back spacers look nicer, way nicer, which you'd expect with the price difference. As same with the quality. So we definitely get a winner aesthetically to the Harsey. Quality-wise, it's also going to go to the much more expensive knife. Not uncommon. This stuff happens when you have a very expensive knife versus one that's not too expensive. But there's a bit of a caveat with this one that I do have to point out, because I know we'll probably jump on it in the comments. So this is the first knife, this and another model. That is the first ones that Spartan made in Taiwan. First time working with that factory. There have been some quality control issues. Spartan has been universally, as far as I've heard, awesome as far as taking care of them. No problem at all. It is the first time they've worked with that factory. I think they even kind of expected it. And teething issues, stuff's going to happen. They've taken care of it. But yeah, there was stuff mostly with like the action and things like that and the lockup. A lot of it wasn't too dramatic, but they've still been very good about taking care of them. But especially with that in mind, I have to give the quality to the Harsey, absolutely, for sure. Now, the blade. So as I said, little caveat, I'm pretty biased. I really like XHP a whole lot. S45VN, still fairly new. I don't have a ton of experience with it. I have 3 or 4 knives with it now. It's 10 better than S35VN. I know there's other differences than that, but it's not a night and day difference, between S45VN and S35VN. At least in my experience so far, it's not like, oh my God, it's amazing. Where XHP, I've always really, really liked it. I was very upset when Cold Steel stopped using it, and I'm glad to see it back. Neither of these are slicing machines, even though they do have pretty thin blade stock. 0.13 and 0.125. They're near enough not to matter, but you're looking at 20. This is the Harsey was 25 thousandths behind the edge, 27 thousandths behind the edge on the Talos. Both of them not wickedly sharp behind, or not wickedly thin behind the edge. Both came very well sharpened, I will say that. But XHP, I kind of like to see the XHP a lot, and it has a sharpening choil, which the more I sharpen stuff, the more and more I appreciate that. I really like that it has a sharpening choil. To my memory, the only Spartans that actually have sharpening choils are these, which I think is great. You can see none on a 3.25. There's none on my full-size Spartan Harsey, and to my memory, there was none on my Pallas either. So nice to see a proper sharpening choil and a really good steel. And slicing-wise, they're both okay. There's nothing to really, write home about with either of them. And as far as like piercing tips and stuff, capabilities, they're pretty equal. So really, I just like the choice of XHP better, and I like the sharpening choil. So blade, I'm going to give to the Talos. Ergonomics. Both very similar, obviously, because they're both very similarly sized, very similarly shaped, both undeniably Harsey designs. I have large size gloves, but fairly skinny fingers, but I do have normal human sized palms. I'm going to give it to the Talos because on this full titanium, some of this jimping is just a bit much, and I felt that way when I first got out of the box. This, especially up here, this bit of jimping on the spine, it's just it's a lot. It's pretty aggressive, and honestly, in use, like, my hands don't really even touch that. I would rather this was just smooth. Always felt that way about the 3.25. It's one of the only things I don't like about this knife. Otherwise, it's fine. I can feel the pocket clip a little bit, but it's fine. But God, I just don't even think that jimping needs to be there. I think it could just be gone, and this would probably be a tie or even go to this. But the G10, much more comfortable. There's no jimping in that spot, just a little bit on the blade, which is fine. That's all you need. And I was really worried about the deep carry clip, because a lot of times knives in this size do not lend themselves to deep carry clips, because this is just a high point right where you don't want it when it's in your hand, and they often cause a hot spot. But the angle of this handle, it just lands in a perfect spot in my palm. No hot spot whatsoever. I can actually feel this clip less than I can the one on the 3.25, which is pretty surprising. Ergonomically, this is just really, really good. The G10 is plenty aggressive enough to give you some grip, but it's not over the top. So yeah, I have to give it to the Talos, which kind of surprised me. I was not expecting to do that because of the deep carry clip. I just assumed I would probably wind up liking the Harsey better, but it's just that jimping's just a bit too aggressive. Carry. Bring out Yeo Levi's. I was expecting just to give this one to the Talos immediately because it is a deep carry clip. I like deep carry clips. I don't like that this is right hand only, even though I am right-handed. My son's a lefty, so I have some sympathy to you 10% of the population. Yeah, freaks. I'm just kidding. But it does carry nice and deeply. I like the look of the clip, how much is sticking out. Like, it's pretty unobtrusive. You can get your hand past it. These are both pretty equal as far as this goes. But again, no jimping on the spine, so that's nice. You do kind of feel that when your hand slips past it on the Harsey. But this full titanium is just a bit smoother getting out of the pocket. As I said, the G10 isn't super aggressive on the Talos, but it's aggressive enough that I think it's going to wear on your pants eventually. It's not a pocket destroyer. It's more like a pocket wearer, I guess I would say. The Harsey is right-hand, left-hand carry. And yeah, that jimping's there, but it's not really a big deal. I don't hit it very often. And even though I usually like a deep carry clip, I don't know. I just find this to be more pleasurable to have in my pocket. Just as far as carry goes, reaching in my pocket, I'm going to give it to the Harsey. And I tried to explain why, but I'm not really sure that I did. It's just an unquantifiable thing. I just like, this just feels better in my pocket than the Talos does. Deployment. So the Talos we're going to spend a lot more time on. So it uses a combination of phosphor bronze and Teflon washers. Some people get really upset about that, or have gotten really upset about that. That doesn't really bother me. Yes, it is a way that some manufacturers use to hide, tolerances. If you're using both of those washers back to back, it is kind of easier to make one a little thinner, one a little thicker, and hide some, blade play or centering or things like that. I don't think that's the case with this. It does run on what they call the oil-infused bronze bushing system. So it does have a bronze bushing in there, which is supposedly oil-infused, hence the name, to give it a smoother action. But it isn't really that amazing. It's fine, but it's just not that amazing. And the thumb studs are a little bit too small, I feel. It's just not quite as easy to get that flick as it is with the Harsey. The Harsey is running on just bronze washers. Very, very simple, but it's easier to get snapped out, and it just feels that little bit smoother. Even with all the little tricks done on this, it hasn't done as well as just admittedly, this one very well broken in Harsey 3.25. It's just bigger bronze washers, and I know it's just this thing is just super smooth. It feels, that quote unquote Sebenza smooth. where this doesn't quite get there. It feels fine for 115 bucks, but this feels a lot better. So value. I have to say the Talos. A lot of the stuff that I like more about the Harsey are slightly unquantifiable, such as the design and aesthetics. Like, I think that I like the look of this better. The quality right now, that's a big deal. This is probably gonna catch up and be pretty darn good the next run of them. I really wouldn't stress about that too much. It also won in the carry, which a lot of people don't care that much about it. Deployment, again, it's a bit more of a subjective thing. They both deploy okay. So value-wise, yeah, I'm gonna have to say the Talos. I mean, they both center up fine and all that stuff, all that stuff you look for. I have to give it to the Talos. So what does that leave our scores? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Harsey 3.25, and since value counts for 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Talos. But I always say value is the tiebreaker. So by the scores, Talos. But in my particular case, I still own this one. At the time you guys are going to see this video, this one is already winging its way onto somebody else. I like the Talos. It's a good knife. Definitely, if you can't afford one of these and you bought one, you're not going to be disappointed. I would recommend doing that. But for me, because I have this channel, I have the means, I like this one. I like the Harsey 3.25 a little bit better. Quite a bit better for me. But I totally get why you would choose this one. I think if you just go by the scoring and, quantitative things, yeah, the Talos. So I hope you guys have found this informative and enjoyed it. I've been Brian. Have a good one.